You sure this isn't a granny jumper?
No, I think it's nice.
Thanks.
It's you look like a librarian or something.
Yeah, see, there you go. Yeah. And
no, but like a young librarian.
Swing them round in case I do look like a complete granny.
No, you don't look like a granny.
Anyway, I just caught a glimpse of myself in that awful thing over there and thought, Jesus. Anyway, we'll go for it.
It's chic. They're kind of in now, that kind of look.
More importantly, the country will be a slightly safer place because Trevor Byrne failed in his appeal against the severity of his sentences. Before we came on, I was just asking you how long was he in, how long has he got to serve. Like, Trevor Byrne is one of the most dangerous individuals in gangland for a long time.
Yeah.
Like, he is a hitman. He has groomed and, brought up, mentored the guy we call Mr. Flashy.
Yeah.
He is suspected and has been quizzed in relation to the murder of Neddy Hutch, the monk's brother, days after the Regency Hotel. He seemed to be somebody who enjoyed his work as well as made money on it.
Yeah, and I think John Gilligan himself tried to blame him for those attempts on his life, didn't he? Yeah, he's sort of really well known in that area, like the Finglas, northwest Dublin area, and he has like dozens of convictions. I think he has over 44, but he's obviously spent, before his most recent convictions, like he was in jail, I think, until 2009, and then he was jailed then in 2020 for the latest raft of offences. So he would have had that period in between where he seems to have sort of been had a stranglehold on drug dealing and criminality in that particular area. And as you said, people like Mr. Flashy, they sort of cut their teeth with him a bit.
Towards him as well.
Yeah.
So he wound up essentially being, while he was a hitman for hire, he also sort of wound up running the Kinahan operation in that part of Dublin, Finglas, which has always been one of the biggest turfs in Dublin. You have big names kind of from out there over the years, going back to, I suppose, PJ Judge, Marlowe Highland, all those crews were really centred and headquartered in Finglas. But Trevor Byrne became their man.
Yeah. And like, he was kind of, I suppose, around the time that a lot of them were probably leaving the country and partying it up in Spain and Dubai. He was the one there, wasn't he? Like, and he sort of probably had that aura of violence around him where you wouldn't mess with him.
Yeah, because I was wondering, was that a promotion because of that? Because there was a lot of kind of fallout in the Kinahans at one particular time, and certain people did get over promoted. Like, has he a business brain, Trevor Byrne, or is it just a mind for violence and fear?
I don't know. Like, he seems to be, just judging from his interactions in prison and all that, he seems to be, and from what, like when I was news editor of the Herald, Ken Foy wrote a lot about him, and he just seemed to be this kind of guy that was known as just really violent. Didn't really have much sort of empathy about him, and maybe had that type of aura, like the old school fear sort of thing that he ruled by. And like, since he's been in prison, like he was rushed to hospital there last summer. He took ill suddenly, but then he was obviously, his life was saved by prison officers. And then when he was in the hospital, he spat at and attacked staff and basically went mental and was like ripping out his IV line and all that kind of thing. So just not a very pleasant guy, and so sort of seems to be marked by that violence kind of thing.
So do you remember him first coming on your radar? Like, had he a nickname, or was he always referred to as Trevor Byrne? I can't think of a nickname just off the top of my head that he goes under.
No, I can't think of a nickname. And he was in prison. Like, I think he was released. So basically he was in prison for a pretty harsh crime where he robbed an off licence and a pub, and he tried to hijack an unmarked Garda car, obviously unfortunately for him, but then he also held a gun to a taxi driver's head and got the taxi driver to drive him away from the scene, essentially. So he got like I think it was over 8 years for that. So like, he was in prison for a long time, but obviously that didn't do anything to make him see the error of his ways. And then when he was released, then he obviously had that reputation. So I don't think there was a nickname, but I think he was just always known as being a very sort of well-known criminal in that area, and known for kind of his violence.
Sounds like he's more of a chaotic, impulsive mind than a business one.
Oh yeah, and it doesn't sound like a business mind, no. Like the way you would like imagine like the family gang run their business and things like that. He seems to be just somebody that sort of used even the crimes that he's been convicted of, like they're robberies largely, but they're firearms, they're threats to people's lives, and they're, he's held a gun to a couple of different innocent people's heads as part of these crimes. So I think that's sort of the sense you get from him. Yeah.
So Mr. Flashy came on his radar and on the scene there. He was a kind of a young upcoming criminal who looked up to Trevor Byrne.
Yeah.
And Byrne mentored him?
Mentored him, yeah. And I suppose because I don't think we needed to give Trevor Byrne a nickname, because he obviously had that serious sentence.
Convictions, yeah.
And he, he has a lot of convictions, and that was a particularly serious one. So Ken would have been writing about Mr. Flashy sort of becoming up in the area. And obviously we gave him that nickname because he was only like very in his early 20s and would have obviously had a penchant for nice runners and things like that. So yeah, I think he obviously probably had him running drug deals and all that kind of thing in the area. And now he's sort of, I don't know if there's been a split, or he seems to kind of be a law unto himself now, obviously in recent years, and has his own feared reputation and has created his own enemies.
He's grown up as such, isn't he? Even though he's only about 28 or something.
Yeah, I think he might be maybe 30 now, but still quite young, younger than both of us anyway.
Yeah. So Trevor Byrne is sort of, I suppose, operating away in Finglas, mentoring that young crew, and he gets involved then, or is alleged to have got involved with the Kinahan organisation at a time when they needed heavies, they needed gunmen. So what happens to him after 2016? Does he go? He leaves the country, I think.
Yeah, did he leave the country?
He left the country, I think, in the aftermath of the Eddie Hutch shooting. Now, I just have a vision of him on one of those jet skis. Yeah.
I think we have a picture, don't we?
Yeah, that's just him.
Yeah,
forevermore in my mind.
That was
on a jet ski, when he's hardly on a jet ski now. We think he's in Mountjoy prison.
Yeah, he only seemed to have that one picture for a long time of him. Like, so yeah, that is the image.
So it just looked like he was always on holiday.
Yeah.
He was arrested in 2016 by guards investigating Hutch's murder and was questioned for several days in Mountjoy Garda Station, but he was released without charge. And I think it was after that he left, not on a jet ski, but he went to the UK. He really, I think, probably saw that he needed to get out of town. There was a lot of heat coming on, a lot of players at that time. And it wasn't until 2020 or 19 that he was then caught with that firearm in Clondalkin.
Yeah. So he was caught with a gun in Clondalkin in 2019, and he was given a sentence for that the following year. And I think it was
9 years.
9 years, yeah. So basically, so he was given that sentence for having the firearm, and then in 2021 he was given another lengthy sentence. I think it was like 8.5 years for this robbery. Basically, he robbed, and this conviction actually dates. So he was convicted like only a couple of years ago, but this crime actually happened in 2010,
right?
Where he went into a bookmakers in Swords and robbed there, and then when he was escaping, he dropped his phone at the scene. So that's how he was basically identified.
Right.
So it wasn't exactly the most smartest crime of the century, but when he was making his getaway, he hijacked a car. So that's kind of seems to be a MO of his, and he held a gun to a woman's head, left her obviously traumatized. So he was convicted for a range of offences in relation to that. So like obviously having the gun, the armed robbery itself, false imprisonment, threats to kill, because obviously during this incident he threatened the woman as well. So both of those totaled 17.5 years, and the judge refused to, make them concurrence where they run at the same time because of this level of violence that was used and the fact that they were completely different victims who were left traumatized. And
so most people, like we hear of, get those concurrent sentences, which means they run at exactly the same time. So if you have your 8 years for one sentence, you're sentenced again for a completely different offence, but the two sentences happen at the same time. So you're going to be out. And, he was in a way like, obviously there's reason for sentencing, and the judges cited the violence that was involved in both of these, but he could see that as unfortunate for him.
Yeah.
And what he did was then he appealed that on the basis that this 17.5-year total is too long.
Yeah, exactly. So he's kind of become a serial litigant while he's in prison. Maybe he's just a bit bored, but he appealed the severity of the sentence, so the 17.5 years. And the basis for that was, as you said, the issue with they claimed there was an issue with consecutive sentencing. And they also said the judge was excessive in his sentencing as well. And that was why it's in the news, because we wrote about it on Sunday. Alan Sherry wrote about how the appeal court gave its judgment, and they basically said that they didn't agree that it was excessive. And they also mentioned the consecutive thing and said that basically, they have their right, the judge is within his or her right to impose a consecutive sentence when it's completely separate crime. It was like different victims, different location, all that kind of thing. So they didn't think there was
they're
any
within
issue
their
with
rights to that. But we do see often that they don't take up that, a judge.
Yeah, we do. And actually, I was only listening today to the Niall did a podcast last week with Joe Drennan's sister.
Yeah.
And obviously now this is, I suppose, he died in that instant. He was knocked down by a really well-known gangland criminal and died. But he was given, because he was convicted, or he was sentenced for 2 different crimes at the same time, and was given a concurrent sentence. So basically they said, well, we didn't get any jail time for Joe because he's serving it together, So
can they, as a family, seek for the state to appeal that?
Yeah, they have. And that was why Niall spoke to her, because the DPP are going to appeal the concurrent sentence.
Yes.
And they're actually, they have a petition online at the moment where they basically want to petition the government to change that, where if somebody dies in a crime, a judge is not allowed to impose a concurrent sentence.
Right.
So
that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
It does make sense, because basically he was, so he was done for 2 sentences at the same time. And originally, I think the family were told that they were going to be on top of each other, and then the judge clarified and said, "Oh no, they're together." But I think because it's nothing to do. I understand if there's links between the 2 crimes, and maybe, if there's other mitigating factors, maybe the judge will bring it in then. But I think if it's something completely different, and if somebody has died, this guy was only, I think he was 21, and he was knocked down by a guy off his head on drugs and drink, fleeing a scene and driving really fast. So I do think in that sentence,
the state is saying that chap's life is worth nothing by,
Well, I think that's what the family felt like, but the DPP is obviously is agreeing with the family, because they're going to try and appeal that now. So hopefully.
When we're on that point, I always feel that somebody who, perhaps it's in an accident like that, it can be from gunshot injuries or whatever, that they're left hospitalized for the rest of their lives. Sometimes people are in a, induced coma for years and years and years. I always think there's a very slim difference, isn't there, when between murder and somebody, taking somebody's essentially their life as they knew it from them.
100%.
Some people can live for years on life support machines and everything.
Yeah, of course.
And yet the justice system doesn't totally appear to recognise that.
No, it doesn't. And I think it's that charge. So obviously there's loads of different ranges of assaults, and there's assault causing serious harm, which is section 4, which is basically you can get up to life for that. And we mentioned that with the Kyle Hayes, the Limerick hurler, his brothers, they pleaded guilty to assault of this guy. We talked about it before. They basically beat him to a pulp, and it was a horrific crime. And they pleaded guilty to the lesser, so serious assault conviction, which I think it only has up to 5 years versus the causing serious harm, which has up to life. So you very rarely see, and I was saying that they're because you're lucky that somebody could die, and then you're in a total different realm of it. So they it's kind
then
of,
you're looking at murder, it's a completely different.
Yeah, or even if it's not intended, you're looking at a completely different crime. But it is, the sentencing kind of is strange in that sense that you have that assault, because if you're causing such, this guy was told, he did an interview with us, the victim, and was told that his mother was told it was 50-50 chance of survival. So if you're going to inflict such injuries on somebody that it's resulting in a charge of assault causing serious harm, even if you're not intending to kill them, you're kind of taking a punt there that they're not going to die. So the fact that you can get up to life for that, but you rarely see that, you'd very rarely see that in those cases. So, and it's similar to this one as well.
17.5 years for Trevor Byrne is a lengthy sentence, so he will get possibly remission on that, or is he guaranteed remission?
I think, are they always guaranteed remission? Is that how that works? But like,
I'm never quite sure how that works.
Is it meant to be 25%?
A quarter of it or something.
Yeah. But like, I think it depends. Like, he's obviously, do they look at your behavior within prison as well, you know? So I think it kind of depends on those things. But yeah, so basically the appeal courts gave back their judgment and said that they didn't agree that his sentence should be reduced. So it's looking like the end of the road in terms of his appeals, because he did put in one last year as well where he actually appealed the convictions. And they tried to raise the issue of, I think for the armed robbery of the bookmakers, there was one guard who identified him on CCTV.
Right.
And they tried to pull something where they said, the guard said, oh yeah, he had a mask on, but he identified certain parts of his face. And then they tried to say, well, you couldn't see his eyes in this CCTV image. But the judge wasn't long to throw that out either. Right. So he's actually tried to appeal the convictions. Yeah. And then he's appealed the sentence. So I think
he's at the end of the road. Now, can he go on to the Supreme Court with that? Can you appeal a failed appeal?
I think you can, but I think you have to get leave to appeal it.
Maybe you do also need a particular reason. I'm sure not everybody can. There has to be a possibility of something there. One way or another, he has to suck it up. He's doing his 17 and a half years. And as far as I know, Eimear, he's still under investigation for the murder of Neddy Hutch. That's still a live investigation. Yeah. He's been questioned a second time.
Yeah, he was only in 2023. He was questioned again. He was taken from prison and questioned over that. So, and there's a file to DPP. And obviously we've seen that, like, you know, we only had Nicky McConnell convicted of the murder of Gareth Hutch very recently. So obviously they
can take so long, these things. I mean, I'm sure you get a sense of comfort if you are a killer and you don't see anything coming for you after what 2016 is now 9 years ago. You probably think, you've got away with it. But that is definitely still a live investigation still.
It is,
with the DPP. And
I think there were so many murders in a short space of time. The investigations are obviously going to take their time. And there's different things coming up. But like, that was also another story we had in relation to Nicky McConnell. He's appealed his conviction for the murder of Gareth Hutch. He was the fourth person convicted of that. So there was two Kinahan gunmen.
Yeah. Some of these appeals kind of pass us by. They just fail and that's it. But I think Trevor Byrne is one that is known certainly as such a violent and dangerous criminal that there will be a sigh of relief heaved in many quarters that he's failed in this regard.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Eimear.
Thanks, Nicola.
Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.